Silas Ward pressed his fingers against the wooden post of his cabin, but the pain in his back wouldn't stop. For 3 days something had been growing beneath his skin, hard and round like a river stone. He'd felt lumps before. Every rancher had scars from barbed wire and horse kicks, but this one was different. This one pulsed. The morning sun cast long shadows across his isolated ranch as Silas stripped off his worn shirt, trying to see what tortured him. In the cracked mirror by his wash basin he caught a glimpse of raised skin between his shoulder blades. The flesh had turned an angry red color, swollen and hot to the touch. Whatever lived beneath his skin wanted out. Mercy Whitmore would know what to do. The old woman had tended wounds and illnesses for 20 years in these parts, ever since the territorial doctor had fled after that business with the cattle thieves. Silas saddled his horse with careful movements, each motion sending fresh waves of discomfort through his shoulders. The ride to Mercy's cabin took him through the narrow canyon where wild flowers grew between the rocks. But today Silas noticed none of the beauty around him. The thing in his back had begun to throb with each heartbeat, demanding attention he couldn't ignore. He found Mercy hanging laundry behind her small wooden house, her weathered hands working quickly despite her age. She took one look at his pale face and set down her wash basket. "Show me," she said simply. Silas turned around and lifted his shirt. Mercy's sharp intake of breath told him everything he needed to know. "This wasn't a normal injury. How long has it been like this?" Her voice carried a strange tone, something between curiosity and concern. 3 days, getting worse each hour. Mercy's fingers traced the air around the swelling. "Careful not to touch the inflamed skin. This isn't natural healing. Something's been buried under there for a long time. Years, maybe decades." The words hit Silas like cold water. Buried. How could something be buried under his skin without his knowledge? "I need to open it," Mercy continued, reaching for her leather pouch of medical tools. "But Silas, you need to understand. Whatever's in there, it wasn't put there by accident. Someone wanted it hidden." As she prepared her instruments, Silas felt the lump pulse again, stronger this time. Something inside was ready to emerge, carrying with it secrets that had been waiting in darkness for longer than he could remember. But he had no idea that what Mercy was about to reveal would destroy everything he believed about his own past. Mercy's blade was sharp, but the first cut sent lightning through Silas's entire body. He gripped the wooden chair until his knuckles turned white, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Hold still," Mercy whispered, her voice tight with concentration. "I can feel something solid beneath the tissue." The pain was unlike anything Silas had experienced, deeper than a bullet wound, more personal than any injury from his dangerous work on the ranch. As Mercy worked, carefully separating skin from whatever lay beneath, Silas found himself thinking about his earliest memories. Strange how he'd never questioned why he couldn't remember anything before the age of 7. There, Mercy breathed. Silas felt pressure release as something small and hard dropped into Mercy's waiting palm. She cleaned the blood away with a damp cloth, and both of them stared at what had been hidden inside his body for so many years. It was a small metal cylinder, no longer than a man's thumb, sealed at both ends with wax that had somehow remained intact. The metal was tarnished silver, etched with symbols that neither of them recognized. "Someone put this inside you when you were very young," Mercy said slowly. "The scar tissue tells me you were probably just a baby." This wasn't done by accident, Silas. This was deliberate. Silas took the cylinder with trembling fingers. It felt warm, as if it had absorbed heat from years inside his body. What kind of person put something inside a baby's back? Someone who needed to hide information. Someone who knew that child might be in danger. The weight of those words settled over them like storm clouds. Silas had always believed his parents died in a wagon accident when he was small, that he'd been raised by his uncle until the man passed away 5 years ago. But if this cylinder had been hidden inside him as an infant, then someone had been planning for something terrible. Mercy handed him a thin knife. You'll need to break the wax seal. But Silas, are you certain you want to know what's inside? Some secrets are buried for good reasons. Through the cabin window, Silas caught sight of a rider approaching in the distance. The figure wore a dark coat and rode with the purposeful pace of someone who knew exactly where they were headed. Strange, since visitors rarely found their way to Mercy's isolated cabin. "Someone's coming," he said. Mercy followed his gaze, and her face went pale. "That's Gideon Flint. He's been asking questions around town about a man with a scar on his back." Silas felt ice form in his stomach. The cylinder suddenly felt like it weighed 100 lb in his hands. How could a stranger know about a scar that had been hidden beneath his shirt for his entire adult life? Gideon Flint dismounted his horse with the smooth motion of a man who had spent years in the saddle. His dark coat was travel-worn but expensive, and his eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail of Mercy's cabin and the two people standing in her doorway. "Morning, folks," Gideon said, tipping his hat. His voice carried the accent of someone from back east, refined, but with an edge that suggested he was comfortable with violence. "I'm looking for a man who might have a distinctive mark on his back. Old scar, probably between the shoulder blades." Silas felt the cylinder burning in his palm. Hidden behind his back, Mercy stepped forward, placing herself between Gideon and the cabin. "Don't know anyone like that," she said firmly. "You might try the saloon in town. More people pass through there." Gideon's smile was thin and cold. "I think you do know someone like that. In fact, I think he's standing right behind you." The silence stretched between them like a drawn bowstring. Silas realized his shirt was still off, the fresh bandage over his wound clearly visible. But how could this stranger have known he would be here at this exact moment? "You've been watching me," Silas said quietly. "For 3 days, ever since you started favoring that side when you walked. Takes a trained eye to notice the signs of something trying to work its way out of old scar tissue." Mercy's hand moved toward the rifle she kept by her door, but Gideon raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "Easy, ma'am. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here because that man has something that belongs to my employer, something that was hidden a very long time ago." "What employer?" Silas demanded. "A man who's been searching for a lost document for 23 years. A document that proves certain land claims in this territory are fraudulent, a document that could make some very powerful people lose everything they've built." The cylinder felt heavier in Silas's hand. 23 years, that would match the timeline Mercy had estimated for when the object was placed under his skin. "You're saying I've been carrying stolen papers inside my body? Not stolen, hidden by your real father before he was murdered for trying to expose the truth about who really owns half the mining claims in this valley." The words hit Silas like a physical blow. His real father murdered. Everything he'd been told about his family had been a lie. Gideon continued, his voice gaining urgency. "Those papers prove that the Territorial Mining Consortium has been filing false claims for decades. They've stolen land from dozens of families, including yours. Your father died trying to expose them. But if that's true—" Mercy interrupted. "Then why are you working for them?" Gideon's expression darkened. "Who said I was working for the consortium?" In the distance, the sound of multiple horses approaching fast made them all freeze. A cloud of dust was rising from the canyon road. Too much dust for just 1 or 2 riders. "You led them here," Silas accused. "No," Gideon said grimly, drawing his weapon. "They followed me, and now we're all in danger." The riders emerged from the canyon like a storm cloud made flesh. 6 men in dark clothing, their faces hidden beneath wide, brimmed hats, weapons clearly visible at their sides. They spread out in a semicircle around Mercy's cabin, cutting off all escape routes with practiced efficiency. "Break open that cylinder now," Gideon urged Silas. "If those papers fall into consortium hands, your father's death will have meant nothing." Silas used Mercy's knife to crack the wax seal. Inside the metal tube was a rolled piece of parchment, yellowed with age, but still readable. As he unrolled it, his hands shaking, he saw survey maps, legal descriptions, and signatures that meant nothing to him, but clearly meant everything to the men writing toward them. "The lead writer is Marcus Stone," Gideon whispered. "He's been the consortium's enforcer for 15 years. He's the one who killed your father." Mercy checked her rifle and counted her ammunition. 6 against 3, not good odds. "Actually," Gideon said grimly, "it's 6 against 2. I'm not the man you think I am." Before either Silas or Mercy could react, Gideon raised his hands high above his head and walked toward the approaching riders. "Stone, I found him. The ward boy has the documents." Silas felt the world tilt beneath his feet. The man who had claimed to be helping him had just betrayed them to their enemies, but as Gideon walked away from the cabin, Silas noticed something strange. The man's movement seemed deliberately slow, giving them time to react. "The back door," Mercy whispered urgently. "We can reach the horses behind the cabin." But as they turned to flee, Silas heard Gideon's voice carry across the clearing, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "The papers are hidden in the old mineshaft. The boy doesn't have them on him." It was a lie. The papers were in Silas's hands at that very moment. Why would Gideon mislead his own associates? Marcus Stone's voice boomed across the yard. "You'd better be right, Flint. We've been searching for those documents too long to be disappointed now." "Check the mine," Gideon insisted. "Half a mile up the canyon. That's where the Ward family hid their secrets." Stone gestured to 4 of his men. "Go search every inch of that mine. Flint, you stay here and watch these 2 until we return." As the riders departed, Silas began to understand. Gideon had bought them time by sending most of their enemies away on a wild chase, but that still left them facing Stone and 1 other gunman and Gideon himself, whose true loyalties remained unclear. "What's your real game?" Mercy called to Gideon once the others had ridden away. Gideon turned back toward them, his expression hard to read. "My real name is Samuel Ward. Silas isn't just carrying our father's documents. He's my brother." The revelation hit like lightning. Silas stared at the man who claimed to be his brother, seeing nothing familiar in the stranger's face. But as he looked closer, he noticed they shared the same dark eyes, the same stubborn jawline. "Prove it," Silas demanded. Stone laughed coldly from his position near the horses. "Family reunion will have to wait. Hand over those papers." "Ward, both of you." Marcus Stone stepped closer, his weapon trained on Silas's chest. The second gunman had positioned himself to cover Mercy, while Samuel remained motionless between the 2 groups, his loyalty still unclear to everyone watching. "23 years I've been hunting those papers," Stone said, his voice carrying the weight of obsession. "Your father cost me everything when he started asking questions about our mining claims. I lost 3 years in territorial prison because of his investigation." Silas clutched the documents tighter. "So you killed him for it. I defended my livelihood. Your father was going to destroy dozens of families who had invested in consortium properties. Sometimes a man has to make hard choices, like putting a document inside a baby's back." Mercy interjected, her rifle still ready. Stone's eyes narrowed. "That was creative desperation. We knew someone had hidden evidence, but we couldn't find it anywhere. Took us years to realize old Ward might have used his own son as a hiding place." Samuel finally spoke, his voice carefully controlled. "Silas, listen to me carefully. When I give the signal, dive behind Mercy's wood pile. The angle will protect you from both shooters. You're still playing both sides," Flint Stone warned, "or should I say, Ward. Yes, we figured out who you really are. Been tracking you for months, waiting for you to lead us to your brother." "Then you know I have every reason to want you dead," Samuel replied quietly. The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Silas found himself studying his alleged brother's face, searching for familiar features. Eyes were similar, and something about the way Samuel held his shoulders reminded Silas of his own reflection. "If you're really my brother," Silas said, "then tell me something only family would know." Samuel never took his eyes off Stone, but his voice softened slightly. "You have a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on your left ankle. Father used to say it looked like a horseshoe turned sideways for good luck." The detail hit Silas like cold water. No one else knew about that birthmark. He'd kept it covered his entire adult life, embarrassed by the unusual mark. "The signal is when—" "I dropped my hat," Samuel continued. "Be ready." Stone was growing impatient. "Enough talking. Hand over those papers or I start shooting. Beginning with the old woman, you'll get your papers," Samuel said, reaching up toward his hat. "But first, let me ask you something, Stone. Do you remember what our father's last words were? How would I know that? Because you were standing right next to him when you put a bullet in his chest." Samuel's hat hit the ground. Chaos erupted instantly. Samuel drew his weapon while diving sideways, forcing Stone to choose between targets. Mercy's rifle cracked like thunder, and the second gunman staggered backward with a cry of pain. But Stone's aim remained steady. His weapon pointed directly at Silas's heart. Silas threw himself toward the wood pile as Stone's weapon discharged, the bullet splintering wood inches from his head. Samuel's shot caught Stone in the shoulder, spinning the man around, but not dropping him. The consortium enforcer was tougher than he looked. Mercy worked the action on her rifle, sending another round toward the second gunman, who had taken cover behind a water trough. The man was wounded, but still dangerous, returning fire that forced her to duck behind her cabin's corner. "The papers," Stone shouted, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "Burn them if you have to, but don't let them reach the territorial government." Samuel advanced on Stone, his weapon steady. "You killed an innocent man for money. Now you're going to face justice." "Justice?" Stone laughed bitterly. "You think the territorial courts will care about your father's crusade? Half the judges in this territory have investments in consortium properties." The sound of approaching horses echoed from the canyon. Stone's men were returning from their fruitless search of the mine shaft, and they would arrive within minutes. "We need to move," Mercy called out. "My cabin backs up against the cliff wall. There's a narrow trail that leads over the ridge." Silas looked down at the papers in his hands. These documents had cost his father his life and had been hidden inside his own body for more than 2 decades. But what good would they do if he was dead? "Samuel," he called, "how do we know these papers will actually matter?" "Stone's right about the territorial courts." "Because I've spent 5 years gathering additional evidence," Samuel replied, keeping his weapon trained on Stone. "These documents are just the final piece. I have testimony from miners, copies of fraudulent surveys, even bank records showing illegal payments." Stone's face went pale. "Impossible. We destroyed all the evidence. You destroyed what you could find. But you didn't know about the cop. Is our father made or the witnesses he spoke with before you killed him?" The wounded gunman made a desperate move, rushing from behind the water trough toward Mercy's position. She swung a rifle like a club, connecting with his jaw and dropping him to the ground unconscious. Samuel Ward Stone said through gritted teeth, "You've been planning this for years. Every single day since I watched you murder my father." The sound of horses grew louder. 4 riders appeared at the canyon mouth, seeing the scene of battle and spurring their mounts into a gallop. "Time's up," Mercy announced. "That trail I mentioned, it's our only chance." Silas tucked the precious documents inside his shirt and grabbed a spare rifle from Mercy's cabin. Samuel kept Stone covered while backing toward the rear of the building. "This isn't over, Ward," Stone called after them. "The consortium has reached far beyond this territory. "Maybe," Samuel replied, "but today justice starts here." As they reached the base of the cliff trail, the four returning riders thundered into the clearing. The race for survival had begun, and the documents that had waited 23 years for justice would finally see the light of day if they could stay alive long enough to deliver them. The cliff trail was treacherous, barely wide enough for single-file passage. Loose rocks scattered beneath their feet as they climbed, each step threatening to send them tumbling into the canyon below. Behind them, the sound of pursuit grew closer as Stone's men reached the base of the trail. "They'll have to leave their horses," Mercy panted, her weathered hands gripping the rocky outcropping for support. "That gives us some advantage." Samuel moved with the confidence of someone who had traveled dangerous paths before. "There's an old mining camp about 2 mi over this ridge. Abandoned, but it has a clear view of the territorial road. If we can reach it, we can signal the next government." "Patrol." Silas felt the documents pressing against his chest with each labored breath. "How do you know about government patrols?" "Because I've been feeding them information about consortium activities for 3 years. They've been building a case waiting for solid proof." The revelation stopped Silas in his tracks. "You're working with the territorial government." "I'm a federal marshal, Silas. Have been since I turned 18. This whole investigation has been official from the beginning." Below them, angry voices echoed off the canyon walls as Stone's men began their ascent. The injured enforcer was shouting orders, his fury driving them forward despite the dangerous climb. "A marshal?" Mercy shook her head in amazement. "And here I thought you were just another drifter looking for trouble." "The badge is in my saddle bag at your cabin. Didn't want to reveal it until I was certain the documents were authentic." They reached a narrow ledge that offered temporary shelter from the climbing men below. Silas pressed his back against the cold stone and studied his brother's face in the afternoon light. The family resemblance was undeniable now that he knew what to look for. "Why didn't you tell me sooner about being my brother, about being a marshal?" Samuel checked his ammunition before answering. "Because I needed to be sure you weren't part of the consortium. For all I knew, they had gotten to you years ago, convinced you to hide those documents willingly. You thought I was working with the people who killed our father. I had to consider every possibility. Too much was at stake." A gunshot echoed from below, the bullet striking Stone near Mercy's head. Stone's men had closed the distance faster than expected. "Move," Samuel ordered. "The camp is just ahead." But as they rounded the next bend in the trail, Silas saw something that made his blood run cold. 2 more riders were approaching the mining camp from the opposite direction, cutting off their escape route. Stone had sent men around the long way to trap them. "We're surrounded," Mercy observed grimly. Samuel studied the approaching riders, then looked back down the trail where Stone's injured men were still climbing. Maybe not. Those riders coming from the north. They're wearing blue uniforms. Silas squinted at the distant figures. His brother was right. The approaching men wore the distinctive blue coats of territorial rangers. "Your government patrol?" he asked hopefully. Samuel smiled for the first time since this ordeal began. "Right on schedule." The territorial rangers reached the mining camp as Samuel fired a signal shot into the air. Captain Morrison, a weathered veteran Silas recognized from previous visits to town, dismounted quickly and assessed the situation with trained eyes. "Marshal Ward," Morrison called, "we received your message." "Are these the documents?" Samuel nodded toward Silas. "My brother has them. 23 years they've been hidden." Waiting for this moment, Stone's men appeared at the ridge line, breathing hard from their climb, weapons drawn. But when they saw the Rangers' uniforms, their advance faltered. Attacking federal officers would mean far worse consequences than simple murder. "Marcus Stone," Captain Morrison announced in a voice that carried across the camp. "You're under arrest for murder, fraud, and conspiracy to defraud the territorial government." Stone emerged from behind his men, his shoulder still bleeding from Samuel Unk's earlier shot. "You have no proof of anything except trespassing." Silas stepped forward and pulled the precious documents from inside his shirt. The papers were slightly creased from their ordeal, but every word remained legible. "Here's your proof." Morrison examined the documents carefully, his expression growing darker with each page. "Survey fraud, forged signatures, false mining claims. This evidence will destroy the entire consortium." "And these," Samuel added, producing a leather portfolio from his coat, "are the supporting documents I've gathered over 5 years of investigation. Bank records, witness statements, copies of original land grants." Stone's face went ashen as he realized the scope of the evidence against him. His men began backing away, understanding that their association with the consortium had just become a liability. "Marcus Stone," Morrison continued, "you're also charged with the murder of Thomas Ward, committed 23 years ago in this territory." "You can't prove that," Stone protested weakly. "Actually, we can," Samuel replied. "I was 8 years old when you killed our father." Old enough to remember faces, old enough to testify, the fight went out of Stone completely. He dropped his weapon and raised his hands in surrender, finally understanding that his long campaign of corruption had come to an end. Captain Morrison's Rangers moved efficiently, disarming and restraining Stone's men. "These documents will be delivered to the territorial capital within the week. Every fraudulent land claim will be investigated and returned to its rightful owners." As the Rangers prepared to escort their prisoners down the mountain, Silas found himself standing beside the brother he had never known existed. The wound on his back had stopped throbbing, as if removing the hidden documents had also removed a burden he hadn't realized he was carrying. "What happens now?" Silas asked. "Now you get your father's ranch back," Samuel replied. "The consortium has been using forged papers to claim ownership for 15 years. These documents prove the land legally belongs to you." Mercy joined them, her weathered face showing satisfaction at seeing justice finally served. "Your father would be proud of both of you." As they walked down the mountain trail together, Silas realized that the mysterious lump in his back had given him far more than just hidden documents. It had returned his family, his heritage, and his father's honor. The long journey toward truth was finally complete. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale from the frontier, where courage and justice collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.